because the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation reported yesterday that traces of cannabis were found by anthropologists in unearthed human remains, suggesting that 17th century Italians were recreational pot users. This gives us perfect explanation as to why they'd later invent pizza, the greatest munchie food of all time. Forensics scientists at University of Milan's Laboratory of Forensic Anthropology and Odontology examined 9 femoral bone samples originally buried near the Ospedale Maggiore in the 17th century. 2 of the 9 bone samples showed prominent evidence of recreational cannabis use, suggesting people who lived in 1600s Milan were stoners too. The literal evidence of cannabis consumption in Greco-Roman culture is nothing new. Article notes that ancient Greek historian Herodotus wrote about flowers with psychotropic effects back in 440 BC. And medical records from the Middle Ages in Europe show cannabis was widely administered to treat anything from gout, urinary infections, and birthing pains to weight loss.
Anthony's about to come in, just so you know.
As well as being used as an anesthetic.
Yeah,
but it was
I
Catholics,
think he has us muted.
like so many other moments in later history, and hater history, I should say, that would later put the kibosh on the region's good times. In 1484, Pope Innocent VIII, definitely not innocent, passed a bull or a decree labeling cannabis as unholy sacrament, banning its use among the faithful. During that era of Inquisition, medicinal and hallucinogenic herbs were associated with magic and witchcraft. For the centuries that followed, there'd be no hard evidence as to use as of now, until now, with the discovery by a team of forensic scientists in Milan. The discovery was made at the Cha Grande Crypt under a church that annexed Ospedale Maggiore, the most important free hospital in the 17th century Milan, known for treating the city's poor. University of Milan biologist Gaia Giordano said that we know that cannabis has been used in the past, but this is the first study ever to find traces of it in human bones. It is an important finding because there are so very few laboratories that can examine bones to find traces of drugs. The goal of the study was to find traces of plants used for medicinal or recreational purposes in the general population and follows an earlier study done by Giordano that found traces of opium in cranial bones and well-preserved brain tissue. 2 of the bones found, one belonging to a woman around age 50 and the other to a teenage boy, showed the presence of 2 kinds of cannabinoids, delta 9 tetrahydrocannabinol and cannabidiol, or cannabidiol, commonly referred to today as DTC and CBD. Giordano says the findings not only suggest cannabis was consumed by all ages and genders, but that it was used recreationally, most likely prepared in cakes and infusions. The team scanned the medical records of Ospedale Maggiore and found no mention of cannabis in its detailed records of healing plants, remedies, or potions administered to the patients in all hospitals in Milan in the 1600s. The absence of cannabis in the list of pharmacopoeia strongly suggests that the cannabis found in the 2 individuals was likely used for the same reason it is today, to relax, zone out, and self-medicate. Current available anthropologic evidence says that the origins of human and modern human cannabis consumption traces back to Central Asia or Western China, where it was used for medicine for millennia, with the first documented case back in 2800 BC. Over the past few years, major technological advancements in dating techniques in LIDAR have revealed more details of cannabis history, including when it was used, what it was used for, who was using it, where, and sometimes why. While that's not that big of a surprise to many of us, that more and more global cultures are being posthumously forced out of the green closet, it's pretty cool to see that stories like this are unfolding in real time. I want to hear what the rest of you guys think about this, man. The late Italianos back in the day, in the days of BC, all the way up to the Prohibition years from the Catholics, smoking weed. I'm Rico Lamite, dopest dad on the street. What do you guys think of this one?
Rico, do we know if this was Bacchiao gelato that they were smoking?
It must have been, you know. They didn't really use cow milk back then, so it was definitely lactose free gelato that they were burning on it.
Lactose-free gelato.
The
Man,
original
oh
land
man.
races, if you will.
Land race,
Yeah.
huh? Fancy. Fancy, fancy,
Or it
fancy.
could have been lactose containing gelato, and it could have been the original LCG.
Wouldn't that be a derivative of cereal milk?
Oh, I see what you did there, Rico.
You like that? You like
I
that?
see
Yeah, a
what you
little
did
milk
do
in that
there.
ass.
Yes.
Uh,
I
no, man,
mean,
I think it's pretty. I think it's pretty cool, man. They're digging up more and more bones. There's a extension of the story that me and Saint Germain always bring up in the immortality key. Now they have lidar, and they're seeing all these bones. They're seeing all these ruins underneath the earth, and they're digging up bodies. They're digging up bones, and they're finding traces of psilocybin, cannabis, ergot, DMT, like in all of these bones. They were getting lit back then, and the prohibition came from the Catholics, man. Blame it on the Pope.
blame it on the Pope. Blame it on the Vatican.
Yep.
But they
I don't think people understand the history of the use of this plant yet. I mean, we go back to 3000 BC in China. They were making mention of it for its medicinal uses. But before that, because no one's had the ability or they haven't really tested body tissues that are still available for the presence, and they're going to start piecing this together because it's clear that we don't know when the first Homo sapien grabbed one of these flowers and started chewing on the seeds and went, "Holy
Right.
shit, this stuff's pretty good." Okay?
mhm.
Who knows when that happened or when the first psychedelics were used? But we'll go closer to the truth. But there was a
I think,
study in the '80s done of mummies, and I think half a dozen different labs found the presence of tobacco and coca in a mummy from
Yeah,
1000 BC.
I remember that.
LIDAR is going to help us understand the Amazon basin and connections between the Mediterranean and the Amazon, and we'll get a better idea of the use of substances. But the church branded all this stuff as the devil's work and witches and shit like that, and we're still fighting that. I mean, I don't know if you've heard church ladies jump up and scream at you before, but we're still fighting that stigma, you know, decades,
Yeah.
centuries later.
It amazes me how many religious people only live in the New Testament and don't and totally disregard the entire Old Testament. Dale.
it's funny to me how they even disregard the New Testament when it says, "If he without sin cast the first stone."
Yep.
Yeah, I I'm sorry. Just a lot of viewers may be upset with me for saying this, but I just believe we live in an era where there's just so many fake things to be a part of, and it's hard for me to say it because God knows your heart, best. But when you claim to be a Christian and you do things are totally against Christianity, I can only surmise that you're not a Christian. You're just somebody who likes to point a finger and just be judgmental. People take drugs all the time. People OD on opioids. I don't see Christians or people in churches saying you're taking oxycodone and now you're hooked on it and everything else, and you don't see them saying stuff like that.
Yeah,
You'll see
there's
them.
no public outrage like there is with you
No,
consuming
no.
cannabis.
No.
No, and tell them about their wine. And the moment you tell them about their wine, and you go to a passage of the Bible where it says don't drink wine, but then they say, well, Jesus said the wine is my blood and the bread is my body. You understand? Like they'll find an excuse. Like they always find an excuse, dog. You're
Hold on,
never gonna make anyone happy.
didn't we just cover a
You
story
took it you can take it a
relating
step.
to what was in the wine, that it was actually like some hallucinogenic
Yeah.
mushroom tea with
Yeah.
DMT and a few other
Yep.
hallucinogens?
Yep. That's what I was going to take it to, man, Tony. Yeah, taking it a step further, the wine that they were drinking back then at when they talk about people being drunk and all that, was 2% alcohol. You can't get drunk off of 2% alcohol wine and just start doing wild stuff. They were getting it in. They had
They were getting it in.
elixirs. They had
And
elixirs. If
they
you
had an
imagine that,
elixir, and that elixir had that cocaine in it. That
yeah,
elixir had that cocaine, and that was a widely used plant
yeah,
up
yeah.
until even our inception here in Americas, where we created a government. They were giving kids cocaine and soda pop.
Yeah, yeah, man. Yeah, back then, if you just think of the things that they were saying, the crazy things that people say are, parables. They say they're metaphors in the Bible. I don't believe that. I believe that they were just tripping balls and they wrote down what they saw. Jesus walking on water, giving sight to the
It was like,
blind.
oh my, did you see that?
Hold on. So
That
so
nigga
so
just walked
you're
on
saying
water.
that the Red Sea wasn't really parted?
I'm
It
saying
was in
somebody
their,
was
it
high
was
and they
in
told
their
you.
mind.
Man, so it's like basically all these stories is just like from one big game of telephone is what you guys are telling me.
Right. Yeah.
Mm.
Did
Well,
Jesus really come back from the dead, or was he just passed out for a couple of days and had to recover?
I had
Oh,
I don't know.
oh,
I wasn't there.
oh, they
I
had the
wasn't there.
ultimate party. They had the ultimate
I was
party, and
not
it took
there.
him
I don't
3
know.
days to recover.
He had to come down. I have no idea.
I mean,
But,
Now he's gonna have me thinking about this all day long.
oh man, we just threw Tony
or
down the
just take
rabbit
your
hole.
favorite Bible story and just put it in your mind that they were probably tripping balls when they wrote this.
Yo, I didn't even smoke yet, but that was a super high moment. It just, he just crazy on Jesus. He said,
Oh,
"Yo,
man.
maybe he was ripped and disappeared for 3 days and came back and said, hey, feel good now, back."
Yes.
I don't know where I was. I don't know what happened to y'all.
And
Talking to
Back up,
God.
get it in.
and